In an industry that's pretty much built on profit, hype, and, let's be honest, selling out, there was one band that just did the exact opposite. Today we're talking about Fugazi. This was a group that didn't just play music. They built an entire world around a set of principles that were completely at odds with the music business.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with the one number that really defined them: $5. And look, this wasn't just a price tag. It was a huge philosophical statement. It was a line they drew in the sand against the whole commercialization of music.
And that really leads to this question, which gets to the absolute heart of what Fugazi was all about. I mean, it challenges the entire formula for success in music, right? It makes us totally rethink the relationship between an artist and their audience.
All right, so let's kick things off with their most famous principle. And believe me, it was so much more than just a cheap ticket. It was a declaration of who they were and what they stood for.
The rule itself was actually pretty simple. Music is this communal thing, this shared experience. Fugazi really believed it should be available to everybody, especially young fans, not just the people who could afford these crazy high-ticket prices. It was a radical idea: accessibility over exclusivity. And this chart, wow, it just lays out how different their world was. Just look at that contrast. At a Fugazi show, no hidden service fees, no middlemen taking these giant cuts. By cutting all that out, they made sure the money was actually going towards sustaining their art, not just lining some corporate pockets.
So you've got to be asking, how in the world did they pull this off? Well, it came down to pure discipline and a really hardcore DIY philosophy. They kept their costs incredibly low when they were on tour, and by controlling everything through their own label, Dischord Records, they actually made their radical vision financially sustainable, completely on their own terms.
Okay, so let's move on to the next piece of the puzzle and see how this all connects. That whole $5 rule, it was only possible because they were absolutely insistent on having complete and total independence.
Think about it. In an industry where everyone tells you a manager and a major label are the only way to succeed, Fugazi just saw them as a threat. They truly believed that any outside influence would just water down their vision and force them to compromise their principles for profit.
And this right here, this breaks down their whole process. Dischord Records wasn't just some label. It was like a closed loop. The band members themselves were booking the tours, handling the money, and they owned all their own music. Every single decision was made by them for their community.
And this is the crucial point, right? They weren't just rejecting the industry's methods, they were rejecting its entire value system. For Fugazi, success meant never, ever having to compromise. But this uncompromising way of thinking didn't just stop with the business side of things. Nope, it extended right into the crowd, and it actually shaped the whole atmosphere of their legendary live shows.
Back then, violent moshing was getting really common at punk shows, and the band saw it as this exclusive, dangerous thing. So they actively fought against it. They believed their concerts had to be these inclusive spaces where everyone could feel safe, not some arena for aggressive intimidation.
And look, this wasn't just talk. They would literally stop a song right in the middle of a performance to call people out. There was this famous moment where they got the whole crowd to just sit down on the floor. It wasn't about being preachy, it was this powerful, direct action to reclaim the space for the entire community.
So the band went on what they call an indefinite hiatus way back in 2003. So why does their story and their whole model still resonate so powerfully today?
Well, you have to understand that this whole approach came with a really clear set of trade-offs. On the one hand, yeah, they had total artistic freedom and this incredibly loyal fan base. But on the other hand, it meant a massive workload and, by design, very limited mainstream reach. It was a demanding path for sure, but it was the one they chose.
But their influence, it didn't just fade away when they stopped playing. In today's music world, which is so dominated by streaming giants and these giant corporate festivals, you could argue their principles are more relevant than ever.
Their entire ethos basically became a blueprint for the modern independent artist. Just look around today. The spirit of direct-to-fan sales, of artist autonomy, of building an ethical community, it lives on in platforms like Bandcamp and Patreon. These are the tools that are empowering a whole new generation of artists to bypass the industry gatekeepers, just like Fugazi did decades ago.
At the end of the day, Fugazi's legacy really forces us to confront this question. They proved that you could build a sustainable career by making up your own rules. They defined success not by how much money they made or how famous they got, but by the unwavering integrity of their art. And in an industry that's always demanding compromise, that might just be the most radical idea of all.